Welcome to today's deep dive. It is incredibly great to have you here with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
So if you have ever looked around and wondered why two people who, start with the exact same background from the exact same neighborhood can end up with entirely different financial realities a decade later, then you are in exactly the right place.
Absolutely.
Today, we are going on a mission to uncover the literal operating system running in our brains that dictates our financial reality.
It's a question that completely reorients how you view success, really.
Right.
Because we tend to look at financial disparity and immediately assign it to external factors, right? Like we look at the economy or where someone went to school or who their parents are.
The easy excuses.
Exactly. But the notes we are diving into today look entirely inward. They completely bypass luck, timing, or, who you know as the root of wealth.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are looking at a breakdown of the exact psychological differences between a rich mindset and a poor mindset. And what I appreciate about this analysis is how it completely strips away those usual excuses. It argues that our financial destiny is driven by subconscious software.
Mental programming.
Right, mental programming that is largely installed during our childhood, and it's controlling every single financial decision we make, usually without us even being aware it's running in the background.
What's fascinating here is that it approaches wealth not as a math problem, but as a behavioral outcome.
Which changes everything.
It really does. And that is why this is so deeply relevant to you listening right now. Whether you feel like you are working incredibly hard but still hitting an invisible ceiling, or maybe you're just curious about the underlying psychology of why some people effortlessly attract opportunities.
This conversation is going to help you identify exactly which operating system you are currently running. Because just like a computer, you cannot update your software until you know what version is currently installed.
Exactly. You have to run the diagnostic first.
And the very first major difference we need to talk about is perhaps the most foundational of all. It is how these two mindsets fundamentally view the concept of money itself.
The scarcity versus abundance paradigm.
Yes, exactly. So the poor mindset sees money as deeply scarce. It's this finite, fleeting resource that is extremely hard to get, and therefore it is something you have to fiercely protect.
You hold on to it tightly out of pure anxiety.
Right. But a rich mindset sees money as abundant. It flows. It's a tool meant to be multiplied, not a precious artifact to lock away in a vault somewhere.
There is this brilliant analogy in the data that really stuck with me. It's the idea of looking at a dollar bill not as a finished product, but as a seed.
Oh, I love that.
Right. And this leads to a deeply counterintuitive point. Holding onto your money too tightly actually makes you poorer.
Wait, hold on. Devil's advocate here.
Sure.
We have all been taught since childhood to save for a rainy day, put your money in a piggy bank, then put it in a savings account. Are we actually suggesting that keeping my money safe in a bank is a bad thing? How does that work in reality?
It sounds incredibly backwards at first glance, I know. But the reasoning is purely mathematical and psychological. If you are just hoarding cash out of fear, your purchasing power is slowly being eradicated by inflation.
Right, the silent tax.
Exactly. Your quote-unquote safe money is actually bleeding value every single day. But more importantly, you are losing out on the opportunity cost.
Because of the seed analogy.
Yes. A seed sitting in a jar on your shelf is safe from the elements, sure, but it will never become an orchard. Safety for the poor mindset is found in hoarding. Safety for the rich mindset is found in planting and growing.
That makes a lot of sense when you frame it around opportunity costs. And thinking about where this comes from, the childhood origins of this programming are so universally relatable.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the phrases so many of us grew up hearing at the dinner table. Things like, "Do you think we're made of money?" Or, "Money doesn't grow on trees."
We've all heard those.
Right.
Yeah.
The argument is that hearing these phrases repeatedly wires your young brain for survival and scarcity.
And that early programming fundamentally shapes your identity as you move into adulthood. It creates a deeply ingrained, almost invisible belief system.
It just runs in the background.
Yeah. The poor mindset internalizes those childhood phrases and quietly concludes, money is not for people like me. Wealth is for other people.
Which is a tragic way to view your own potential.
It is. But the rich mindset operates on an entirely different underlying assumption. Their baseline belief is, I can create money whenever I need to.
Which is such a massive shift in how you walk through the world, and there is a really practical way to test which baseline you are operating from.
The price tag test.
Yes. Pay attention to what happens in your head when you see something you want, but currently do not have the cash for. A poor mindset looks at the price tag and says, I can't afford that.
And neurologically speaking, the moment you say that, your brain just shuts off.
The conversation is over. You have accepted the limitation.
Exactly. It changes your brain into a passive state of acceptance. But the rich mindset looks at that exact same price tag and asks, how can I afford that?
Or what kind of value do I need to create to make this possible?
Right. It is a slight linguistic tweak, but it forces the brain into an active state of problem solving. It demands a solution rather than accepting a closed door.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's transition into how these different operating systems interpret reality, starting with how they view obstacles.
Because the contrast there is incredibly stark.
Right, because if you put these two mindsets in the exact same difficult situation, they will interpret the reality of that situation completely differently. Let's say a certain product in an industry is way too expensive, or customers are highly frustrated with the lack of customer service in a specific market.
The poor mindset looks at that landscape, gets annoyed, and says, well, that sucks. The system is broken. That's just how it is.
They see a permanent roadblock and they complain about it.
But the rich mindset looks at that exact same market frustration and asks, how can I build a bridge over this roadblock and charge a toll?
A completely different lens.
They see a poorly served market as an open invitation to step in, create value, and get paid for it.
And that proactive problem solving ties directly into how these mindsets process failure. For the poor mindset, failure is deeply personal.
It is attached to their ego.
And their identity, right? If a business venture fails or they get passed over for a promotion, they think, I am a failure.
And that visceral feeling of not being good enough causes complete paralysis. They retreat to safety and they stop trying new things.
It's just too painful to risk feeling that way again.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the rich mindset views failure with almost clinical detachment. They absolutely do not attach it to their self-worth.
So how do they view it then?
They view failure simply as data. It is just real-time feedback from the market telling them, okay, that specific pricing model didn't work, or that pitch didn't land. What variable do I change for the next iteration?
Yes, separating the action from who they are, which leads to one of the most profound concepts we are looking at today, the volume of action.
This is a huge one.
The overarching idea is that highly successful people do not possess some magical clairvoyance. They succeed simply because they try a significantly higher volume of things.
The breakdown of the numbers is really eye-opening.
It really is. It goes something like this. If you try 10 new initiatives, 5 of them are going to completely fail.
Yeah.
3 will probably just break even and be a waste of time. But two will succeed so massively that they eclipse all the losses.
That is the game right there. It is a game of probabilities.
Yeah.
But you cannot play that game if you are emotionally crippled by the 5 inevitable failures.
But practically speaking, how does someone actually build the stomach for that? Failing 5 times in a row hurts.
It definitely does.
It costs time, it costs money, and it is embarrassing. How do you survive that without just throwing in the towel and going back to the safe route?
That is exactly the friction point where most people tap out. Surviving it requires you to reframe your entire relationship with risk.
How so?
Well, the poor mindset operates under the assumption that avoiding risk is the ultimate goal of life. Get the secure job with the pension, never invest in anything volatile, keep your head down, don't stand out.
They believe that by minimizing risk, they are keeping themselves safe.
But the reality is that playing it safe is actually the most dangerous game you can play. Because by avoiding small, calculated risks in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you are accumulating one massive catastrophic risk.
Which is the risk of waking up at 65 years old, looking back and realizing you completely wasted your potential because you were too scared to try.
Exactly. The rich mindset inherently understands that life itself is risky. There is no perfectly safe path. So they choose to take calculated asymmetrical risks.
Where the downside is capped, but the upside is potentially life-changing.
And understanding your relationship with risk naturally dictates how you allocate your resources. Because once you decide you are willing to play the game, you have to decide exactly where to invest the 2 most valuable assets you possess.
Right. Time and money. And how these 2 operating systems spend their time and money is a literal night and day difference. Let's start with time, because this is where the leverage really lives.
The critical paradigm shift here is that the poor mindset trades their time for money, while the rich mindset trades their money for time.
The poor mindset thinks, if I want to make more money, I just need to work more hours. They view their time as an infinite resource that they have to constantly sell to the highest bidder.
But the rich mindset sees time as their ultimate finite asset. It is the one thing they can never print more of, so they will gladly spend cash to buy back their hours.
Let's ground this in a really common scenario from the source material. Imagine a homeowner with a leaky pipe under their kitchen sink.
The classic DIY trap.
Exactly. The poor mindset will spend 3 hours on YouTube, take 2 trips to the hardware store, and get covered in grime just to save $50 on a plumber.
And I have to interject here,
Yeah.
because there's a huge psychological barrier at play in that exact scenario.
Oh, for sure.
I know people, and I've been this person, who feel a strange sense of pride in doing it themselves to save that $50. Parting with that money feels like a loss. Why is it so hard to let that go?
Because we are terrible at calculating our own hourly personal rate. We see the $50 leaving our wallet, which triggers instant pain, but we don't calculate the invisible cost of the 3 hours we just burned.
For a rich mindset, parting with the $50 isn't a loss. It is an investment in leverage.
Right. Because those same 3 hours, if protected, could have been spent on a high-impact strategic activity, like designing a new business system or learning a high-income skill that generates $500.
They understand that you cannot shrink your way to wealth by pinching pennies on low-value tasks. You have to expand your way to wealth through leverage.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. You cannot shrink your way to wealth. And that exact same philosophy applies to their spending habits.
Yes, the difference between buying assets and buying liabilities.
Now, since we're talking to an audience who understands the mechanical difference between an asset and a liability, let's skip the basic definitions and look at the psychology behind the purchases. Because poor people spend money to look rich, while rich people spend money to become richer.
Precisely. It is about the need to signal status versus the desire for actual freedom.
The poor mindset, often driven by insecurity, uses their capital to buy depreciating liabilities. The luxury car on a high-interest lease, the designer clothes, the oversized house.
They are trying to loudly convince their neighbors that they're successful.
But the rich mindset possesses a quiet confidence. They don't need the validation of the neighbor because their capital is being quietly deployed into assets that put money back into their pockets every month.
It is the loud desperation of debt versus the quiet confidence of wealth.
And speaking of assets, one of the biggest assets a rich mindset continuously invests in is themselves. The differing views on education here are staggering.
They really are.
The poor mindset largely believes that education is a defined chapter of life. You finish high school or college, they hand you a piece of paper, and you are done. Your learning phase is over.
And if they do need to learn something new later on, they will exclusively scavenge for free content online.
Right, they won't pay for it. The rich mindset, however, views education as a lifelong, aggressive investment. They understand that free content is great for basics, but it is often disorganized and costs you an enormous amount of time to piece together.
So they gladly pay for structured courses, high-level seminars, and direct mentorship.
They are buying speed.
Exactly. They are paying a premium to learn faster, to skip the trial and error phase, and to avoid making the costly mistakes that the mentor has already made.
And the data on this from the text is just wild. The average millionaire apparently reads 52 books a year.
That is a book every single week.
Compare that to the average person who reads maybe 1 or 2 books a year, if that. When you compound that gap in knowledge, perspective, and strategic thinking over a 10-year period, it is no wonder their financial realities end up light years apart.
It creates an insurmountable cognitive advantage. And that constant input of high-level knowledge inevitably forces a shift in how you interact with your environment, and more specifically, the people you choose to surround yourself with.
So what does this all mean? When we look at all these behavioral differences, how we view a dollar, how we process a failure, how we value an hour of our time, it clearly steers us toward the deeper, more complex social and moral aspects of wealth.
It really boils down to how we see our own agency in the world.
It absolutely does. It breaks down into a fundamental split between a victim mentality and a creator mentality.
The poor mindset heavily leans into the victim mentality. They believe life is a movie that is happening to them.
Right. If they are broke, it is the economy's fault, it is the government's fault, it is their boss's fault, or it is how they were raised.
And the tragedy of that mindset is that by blaming external forces, you completely surrender your power to change your circumstances.
Because if it is not your fault, it is not your responsibility to fix it.
Exactly. But the rich mindset adopts a creator mentality. They take extreme, almost unreasonable ownership over their lives.
They believe that they are the sole authors of their financial reality. If they don't have money, they do not point fingers. They simply look in the mirror and say, I have not created enough value in the marketplace yet.
Taking that kind of extreme ownership requires a remarkably strong internal environment. And your internal environment is heavily influenced by your external environment, specifically your social circle.
We have all heard the adage that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
And it is so true. If your primary friend group constantly complains about how unfair life is, thinks small, and mocks anyone who tries to start a business or take a risk, that gravity is going to pull you down.
Upgrading your circle is absolutely essential. But I have to ask, doesn't that sound a bit ruthless? The idea that you have to just cut people off or outgrow your friends to become wealthy?
It can feel ruthless, and it is often a very painful transition. It doesn't necessarily mean cutting people off aggressively, but it does mean intentionally shifting where you spend the majority of your energy.
That makes sense.
There is a deeply challenging reality you have to face. You cannot stay small just to make other people comfortable. When you start leveling up, it will trigger insecurities in people who are choosing to stay stagnant. You have to be willing to be misunderstood for a while.
Wow. You cannot stay small to make other people comfortable. That hits hard.
It does.
And I think it addresses a massive emotional hurdle people face.
Yeah.
There is this common defense mechanism that pops up whenever the topic of wealth is discussed. People will cross their arms and say, well, I don't care about being rich. I just want to be happy.
As if those two concepts are fundamentally at odds with one another.
Right. It is a classic defense mechanism. It is often just the poor mindset protecting itself from the fear of failure or insulating itself from the societal shame sometimes associated with wanting to build wealth.
But there is a very powerful counter-narrative to this. Money is entirely neutral.
It is just a magnifying glass. It doesn't corrupt you, it reveals you. It simply amplifies who you already are at your core.
If you are a naturally generous, kind-hearted person, having an extra $1 million in the bank just removes the constraints on your generosity.
It gives you the resources to build schools, fund charities, and take care of your family.
And on the flip side, if you are a selfish, miserable person, having $1 million just makes you a louder, more impactful, miserable person. The money itself has no moral compass.
Which is exactly why the psychological work upgrading your mental operating system has to happen first. You have to become the kind of disciplined, grounded person who can handle the amplification of wealth before the wealth actually arrives.
And that really brings us to the overarching theme of this entire deep dive. Shifting from a poor mindset to a rich mindset is entirely about taking action before you are perfectly ready.
The poor mindset waits for the stars to align. They wait for the perfect economy, the perfect business plan, the perfect amount of savings.
Which means they never actually step into the arena.
The rich mindset prefers messy progress and rapid iteration. They build the parachute on the way down.
And to help you start building that parachute right now, there are 3 immediate, highly actionable steps you can take today.
Let's hear them.
Number 1, audit your thoughts about money for the next 7 days. Just act as an observer in your own mind. Notice when you operate from scarcity, when you feel that anxiety about a bill or a purchase, and consciously force yourself to ask, how can I afford this, instead of, I can't.
Number 2, invest in yourself this week. Buy back some speed, whether it is buying a book you've been putting off, signing up for a masterclass, or taking someone who has the results you want out to coffee. Do something tangible to increase your own value in the marketplace.
And number 3, take one small, calculated risk. It doesn't have to be quitting your job or investing your life savings.
It could be having a difficult conversation you have been avoiding, or finally publishing that piece of content you are scared to share.
Just do something to start building your risk tolerance muscle. Prove to yourself that you can survive the discomfort of uncertainty.
I love those. They are so practical, and they don't cost a fortune to start, and they drive home the ultimate takeaway of everything we've talked about today.
Developing a rich mindset isn't actually about the money.
The money is just a lagging indicator. The true goal is freedom. It is about having options. It is about removing the anxiety of survival so you can actually experience abundance and impact in every single area of your life.
This raises an important question, something for you to really chew on long after we finish our conversation today.
Let's hear it.
If wealth is ultimately just an amplifier of your true character, and if upgrading this mental operating system requires you to become a highly disciplined, risk-tolerant, value-creating person who takes extreme ownership of their life, what if the real treasure isn't the financial freedom you eventually achieve?
Wait, and what is it?
What if the actual reward is the resilient, highly capable, unshakable version of yourself you are forced to become in order to get there.
That is a phenomenal paradigm shift. It means that even if you lose the money, you never lose the capacity to rebuild it because the wealth is literally built into your character.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We really encourage you to pick just one insight from today's conversation. Maybe it's auditing your thoughts, or maybe it's treating your next failure purely as data and apply it this week.
Notice how it feels, and notice what kind of new reality it opens up for you.
Until next time, keep growing and take care.